I found myself in the scriptures. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Now, ever since I was a little boy, as it relates to church, I was active. If it was a holiday, if it was a pastor anniversary, I was probably doing a speech. Bible study, I was in there. One of the for a season or two. My mama was the Bible study children's teacher. Even in my adult life, I have been in and out of the scriptures at different times of my life, going back to God, trying to get my life on the right track. So I have a familiarity with scripture. But finding yourself in scripture is the most important thing, because as I began to read and understand how these books relate to my life in real time, and the mythology inside of the books and the wisdom inside of these holy texts, scriptures, I had to make it make sense for me in real time. So these characters, I needed to make it make sense to how it related to my life. And the more I got into it, the more revelations were revealed to me, and I found myself in scripture. I had an experience. Anybody know me personally, I may have told you that story about how I seen the light. Now, this was back in 2006. I had this spiritual experience that was similar to what happened to Saul in Acts 9 that turned him into Paul. So much so, I created an LLC years ago that was called Acts 9 to kind of give reverence to that experience. But I had that same experience, very similar to what happened to Saul, and it transformed him into a new being. It was a baptism by light, baptism by fire. That was one of the first times I found myself in the scripture. But as of the last, I want to say 20 months, I have found myself more inside of this. And I'm just using the Bible because I read the Quran just as much, but most of you don't read the Quran. You read the Bible, or you skim through it, or you pull it out on Sunday or whatever. But when you really delve off into it and you are consistent, divine revelations will come to you. And one of the stories in their book, I'm gonna talk about 3 right now. But one of the main ones I want to talk about now is the story of Jonah. Everybody know the story of Jonah and the fish, how he was dove in the water, landed in the fish mouth, spit up. Okay, what does that mean? I'm gonna tell you what it means to me. It means to me, for a long time, I have been running from what God has commissioned me to do. I have been putting off what God has specifically signed me up to do. I wanted to do it on my time, or I didn't even want to do it to a certain degree for a long time. I wanted to just do shit my way and get on through my little earthly journey until my time is up and on to the next. But like Jonah, you can't run from what God has called you to do. If God puts something on your heart, if God has put something inside of you that must manifest, you can't run from it. And the more you run from it, you just postpone it longer, and you cause for a bigger scene to have to happen until you finally catch on and be like, okay, I'm done. The same way it took Jonah running from his mission to him to get on the boat, and they was like, man, you are the reason why we going through this storm. Get him off here. And it was then Jonah say, I'm the one, I'll run from it. I don't want nothing else to do with this life. I'll just take myself out. I'm gone. He thought he was taking himself out, but what he did was he finally jumped off into the mission. He couldn't take it no more. And it was at that point God came in and said, all right, I got you now. I got you now. Come on over. I'm going to spare you. Spit you out over here. Now you work for me. This is where I'm at in my life now. I done ran from God calling for so long to where it's like, you know what? Let me go ahead and clock in and punch this clock. But before I could even really get to the story of Jonah, I had to go through the story of Job. I had to live out this story of Job to where everything that I had, everything I had acquired, my people around me, I had to lose every single thing that I had, my pride, my ego, everything that I considered had made me the person who I was scattered out from friends, from lover, from watching my mother lose her mental faculty, from my children, from my the money that I had, my possessions, my businesses, everything that I had accumulated, everything that I had built up on my own, I lost that. And it took me to be like, wait a minute, this is similar to what happened to Job. Job was stripped of everything, and it was by God's command to see how he would react, to see if he would curse God. The devil told God, let me work on him. I guarantee you, if you give me Job, I had that boy cussing you out and damning you, and I have him over here. God said, no, you won't. I'm going to let you do whatever you want to do to him, but I guarantee you that boy going to come back over here with me. That's what I did. I lost it all and was at that point like, why is all this shit happening to me in my life? Why am I being stripped of everything and everybody in my life? What I'm not going to do is, though, I'm not going to submit to the devil. I have already submitted to evil. I've already am in this situation due to my own actions, due to the work that my hands done. Nobody else is to blame. But if it's going to be anything that brings me back into the fold of God or into the kingdom, it's going to be my faith. Even when I had nothing, I knew I had one thing. I knew that if I got in these scriptures, I knew that if I turned my life around and used prayer, I knew that if I began to clean my surroundings, the places I was at, my diet, my desires, I knew that if I could remove some of these addictions, I knew that my faith would be renewed. I knew that my faith would be restored, and I knew that my life would again be restored. And so I took on this Job mentality. And one of the things inside that book of Job, I don't think that we recognize is, if we don't understand, do you know the point in that story when Job began to be restored? I'm going to tell you, Job began to be restored when he began to pray for his friends. He prayed for his friends. That's what I began to do. Now, not the so-called fair weather friends that was around me when everything was good. I'm talking about the friends that I have developed a relationship with, and we're having these high spiritual conversations. We're having these conversations where God is the centerpiece, where our faith is the centerpiece, where righteousness and our walk and who team we on, who we work for now, is the centerpiece. Once I began to start to pray for my friends like that, the people who was stuck beside me when I was going through my roughest period, I began to be restored. I began to see some miraculous events happen in my life. The depressive state that I was in, it began to fade away, and the sun began to shine on my life again. I began to the lowly thoughts I was having, they began to be removed. I began to I could hear that voice loud in spirit telling me, do this. Again, I say, this is how I was able to write that book. Once I got to a space of renewed faith, then the communication came where I began to hear these revelations and began to move on this new frequency that was controlled by God. Jonah, I found myself being Jonah. Job, I found myself in the story of Job. And the last one I want to just talk about now, because it's more, but I want to talk about now, the story of Joseph. I was Joseph in my real time right now. If anybody knows this story, Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, right? He was betrayed by his brothers. His brothers had a jealousy about him. See, he was the younger brother. They were the older brother. He was the younger brother of the same father, but they didn't have those the same parents. But I began to realize, wait a minute, I am experiencing some of the same woes Joseph experienced. Thrown away, and hopefully they had got rid of me, and that's how they tried to do Joseph. But in the time of them betraying their brother, he was picked up inside of a very wealthy kingdom and got to go be brought up amongst kingship. And in his life, he went through other trials, but in the end, his brothers had to sit in front of him while he was amongst royalty. And he forgave them. He forgave them, but it was inside of that story I realized, shit, boy, you can be betrayed by anybody. You can be betrayed by even your closest to kin. And now the story of Joseph inside of the Bible, it's a great story, but I want to tell you the story of Joseph inside of the Quran is in much greater detail. And I always tell folks that is the most beautiful story I ever read in my life. So if you have a Quran, if you don't, I suggest you get a Quran, because a lot of these stories that are in the Bible, a lot of these characters that are in the Bible, they're also in the Holy Quran as well. And a lot of times these stories go into greater depth and detail, and you get a greater understanding on what's really going on, and the spiritual wisdom inside of it, it grows on you. So those are just three of the characters inside of Scripture, how I found myself, how I related it to my life from past, present, and I can see how in the future some of these things can play out. But it's only if your faith is restored, renewed, and your mind and your heart has a certain posture to where you want to do righteous deeds. You worrying about being right just more than being right. Shout out to my boy Sky Weezy about that one. We want to be righteous more than we want to be right. So I just wanted to make this video and tell you, and I urge you to find yourself inside of these books. Find yourself inside of the Scripture so you can extract the wisdom and you can know how to navigate your life on a day-to-day basis. All right, y'all.